Welcome. So glad you tuned in on Leap of Faith as we explore ethos. Ethos is about the characteristic spirit of our Catholic culture. It is about trust, credibility, authority. We partner with the University of Dayton as we seek to explore critical issues of our church that help us to broaden our perspective and reimagine our faith. Take the leap with us. Explore the religious imagination. Our theme for today is Catholic Evangelicals. There's a growing conversation within the church about the significance of evangelism and evangelizing trends. What does it mean? How do we recognize it? What is our role as Christian Catholics for understanding and engaging in conversation or moving forward? A significant members of our younger Catholics, they catch evangelical fire. Younger evangelicals are returning in a corresponding movement to history, liturgy, and a sense of the church as a visible witness. We can speak in a broader sense then of the future of the church as both evangelical and Catholic. So our program today explores the historical development, trends, and challenges of the movement of evangelical Catholics. So let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Dr. William Portier, who has been with us before. He has researched, written, and given lectures on our topic for a diversity of audiences. He is the former Mary Ann Spearin Chair of Catholic Theology at the University of Dayton. He served as the president of the College Theology Society from 2014 to 2018 and is the author of many books and articles. His article titled Here Come the Evangelical Catholics, published in Communio Journal. That is the ground for our conversation today. We also have with us Sister Angela Zukowski. She is the Executive Director for the Institute of Pastoral Initiatives and is a professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Dayton. She has been associated with the Caribbean, this Archdiocese of Port of Spain, and Living Water Community for over 28 years. She's also one of the co-producers of our Ethos program. So Dr. Portier, Sister Angela Ann, welcome. Dr. Portier, I'm going to start with you to help us explore the meaning of the term evangelical Catholics. What factors are influencing growing interest in this topic in the church and particularly in our parishes?
To begin with, religious liberty is where you begin. So if in the United States and in the Caribbean and Latin America, there are no longer state churches, and civil law and religious law are separate. So there can be, this is really important, there can be no legal religious coercion, which was normal for, centuries. So religious freedom means that people will make different religious choices, and that results in religious pluralism, like a multiplicity of religions. And religious pluralism tends to erode traditional cultures and their faiths because there's no social support for faith anymore. And faith tends to become private and individual. So the historical Christian response to this historians call this religious voluntarism, and the historical response to it has been evangelical. That is a focus on Christ, on conversion to Christ, disconnected from a particular church. So it's personal conversion to Christ and an emphasis on spreading the gospel. So you could put it crudely that the default religious posture in the midst of pluralism is evangelical. So evangelize or die. But in the United States, and you have to calibrate this for the Caribbean and Latin America, there's religious liberty, but it came about at different times. we had an immigrant subculture that existed during most of the 20th century and protected Catholics from the usual corrosion of pluralism. But that started to go away in, say, the mid 60s because of various demographic conditions, the end of immigration, and people became Catholics became statistically undifferentiated from the rest of the population. So being a Catholic became a choice in a way that it never was before, like in the first 65 years of the 20th century. It's no longer something that one is born into, it's a choice. So an evangelical Catholic, to put it very simply, is someone who voluntarily chooses to be a Catholic and then has the ethos of the centrality of Christ and the proclamation of the gospel. And for Catholics, this is mediated by the church and its liturgy and its history. And sometimes there's a tension between these two things. And that's kind of the adventure of evangelical Catholics.
So, Dr. Portier, then, what is the evangelical impulse that seems to arise among younger Catholics? And what has sparked that impulse? And do you see it growing in the coming years?
Oh, yeah, it's going to grow. The impulse responds to the conditions that I just described. The evangelical imperative in pluralism. So we have this pluralism creates this religiously diverse society, which is in many ways very secular, but not completely secular. There is lots of spiritual hunger in our culture. People increasingly distrust all institutions, including religious institutions. And so there's kind of this postmodern shopping mall of culture of which Catholicism is part. And people discover Catholicism in this environment as like you would discover something on the shelves of a supermarket. And Catholics have interesting things, like we have stuff, we have a material culture, we have the liturgy and sacraments that can attract spiritually hungry people. We have a historical church that offers the possibility of being part of something bigger than you and that extends throughout time and the world. We also have a relatively defined set of doctrinal and moral teaching, which, and this is very crucial and the source of controversy and challenge, on a chaotic landscape, many young searchers find clarity and certainty very attractive. So as long as there is pluralism and voluntarism, evangelical impulse will grow.
Dr. Portier, it seems to me that something that we need to maybe focus more on is a sense of church history. I mean, does that help people to understand this polarization, this fragmentation, or this new development that's taking place in the church today?
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but people don't care about history. I taught it for decades. You have to like drag them kicking and screaming into history. Like history, if history makes it very obvious why there is this, like it's a no-brainer. I don't know. I mean, but I don't know how useful it is to try to explain that. I mean, I just did. I gave you a classic comics version of it, but
no, I think that's very helpful. I was just thinking that, sometimes people think of where we are today is the way it always has been, or where they are today is where the church always was. And the church has evolved over time. There have been so many different perspectives on this. But I think you're right. Probably people in That takes care of us that like history.
That's not what you start with. Like you got to attract them with something else, and then you can tell them about history.
So, Dr. Portier, then, how do evangelical Catholics differ from other religious forms or expressions of evangelicals? And do you see this movement challenging or enhancing our traditional Catholic communities and our parishes?
It differs in all the ways that I mentioned in my answer to the last one. Like evangelical Catholics have sacraments and liturgy and history and a material culture. But the big challenge, the main challenge, I would say, for parishes and the source of conflict, well, there's kind of four sources, but the first challenge is formation. So like it's very important that young people interiorly appropriate all these things that they found on the supermarket shelf of culture, like liturgy and sacraments and the sense of being part of a historical church. That needs to be, interiorized, and they can learn this and be mentored by older Catholics. And the evangelicals bring fire and enthusiasm, and the older Catholics have been around for a while. And that was originally my idea of how this would work. But the silo effect of social media, which Facebook started the same year that I published Here Come the Evangelical Catholics, and social media then moved to phones, and it siloed people. And so people tend to cluster into like-minded groups, which makes it very difficult to have like a parish community that is made up of different people. Like when Pope Benedict regularized the Tridentine Mass as the extraordinary form, his idea was that this would take place in a parish where people would experience both forms and they would enrich each other. But as we know, he did that, around the same time as social media were exploding, and that didn't work out very well. The other thing is the search for clarity and certainty. That's a source of great tension in the church. Lots of young people want clarity and certainty. They're not very open to the kind of pastoral approach that the current Pope espouses. And the other challenge, and this will come only through time, is that because the evangelical conversion is a personal experience, the children of evangelical Catholics are not necessarily going to have it. And in American history, evangelicalism tends to be a one-generation thing, but it keeps getting rejuvenated at the waters of revival. And we have various things in Catholicism that correspond to revival. So it remains to be seen how this will work out over the long haul, even though the impulse will continue to be there, because the social and cultural conditions that create it will only get more intense.
And in your article, you wrote the term evangelical blends theology and sociology. So tell us what you mean by this, and how does it help to understand the evangelical movement within the Catholic Church?
Well, I've sort of talked about that. It's basically what the sociology is the idea that this is a voluntary response to cultural and social changes, primarily the rise of pluralism as a result of religious freedom. So that's a kind of sociological analysis of it. The theological analysis of it is that it's very Christ-centered, and the Christianity, the gospel, is basically Christ and the proclamation of of him. And sometimes that comes into conflict with things in the Catholic Church, which I just tried to talk about.
Yes. So, Sister Angela Ann, let's go to you. Tell us what impact you see our conversation having on individuals who are engaged in parish ministry, and how can these individuals prepare to be informed for engaging in diverse conversations within the parish?
This is really complicated when you're in ministry. I think Dr. Portier is...
I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it, Dr. Portier. You did lay the groundwork for that. You know, I think those who are engaging in pastoral ministry today really have to come to terms with what Dr. Portier has been talking about, to understand how some of these ideas, their theological perspectives, evangelical perspectives have emerged, because we're finding in our parishes that on a continuum, people are all along that line of that continuum in different places. We have parishes that are extremely diverse, with their members thinking about different attitudes and dispositions towards parish or faith formation and what it means. And it impacts how we catechize. Definitely, it's beginning to impact how do we engage in catechetical formation. So the bishops in the United States have a new institute for the catechism, because they really want to emphasize the catechism. There's another group that's emphasizing we really need to look at new ways of methodology. We have another group that's looking at how the writings of Pope Francis, how he's trying to help us to become more engaged with the world, and how to develop this deeper relationship with who Jesus is, and to inspire others into that kind of relationship. So I think in ministry, it does mean that we have to rethink how those in ministry are formed, that we prepare them for a world of such diversity. And that means knowing also how to dialogue and engage with that diversity, not with antagonizing people, but trying to come to a deeper understanding. This is where I think the whole thing of synodality comes in. If we look at what the groundwork of synodality is how can we come to understand that we're all coming from so many different perspectives, and yet there's some kind of common home for us where we can come together to be together and to respect one another. So I think for pastoral ministry, it has a lot to deal with rethinking our formation. We deal with that here at the Institute. Like right now, our team is trying to think of what are the new ways that we prepare catechists for this new milieu of this great diversity of young people across the paradigm, across the continuum. And is it possible to even to have something that's common in our catechetical process? Or do we need a richer diversity of formation programs? So it's not an easy issue, but it's a great challenge. And there are times when I say, I wish I were younger, because it would be an exciting challenge to take on. And other times I'm glad I'm older, because I don't think I have the energy to do what's needed. But those of us, those who are in our audience watching our program, know that there's great hope and great opportunity. And that's why I say, if we look at the history of the church, things are changing all the time. And if anything, if we come to understand, there's always change taking place. But what deepens our faith and helps us to respect one another, and how we're developing our relationship with Jesus and forming a faith community in service to the people of God is important.
Thank you, sister. So there's hope as we go ahead in terms of formation, as you say, just adopting that attitude of synodality, which, we are in now, the umbrella of which we are under right now, listening, engaging in dialogue. That really has to be it in this new evangelical thrust. So, Dr. Portier, the term rise of the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, is one of the most striking demographic trends today. So can you explain what this means and who these are and what they seek? What approaches are being applied within the church to engage the nuns for moving forward?
So nuns is a term that sociologists came up with for people that check none on survey questions about religious affiliation. So nuns are disaffiliated unaffiliated religiously in the population. Only a small percent of nuns are atheists or agnostics, and many would describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. They're kind of like searching people who are unhappy with the religious institutions that they find around them. About 20 to 26% of Americans are unaffiliated. In 2008, when the Pew Forum survey first introduced this term, it was only 16%. It's increasing among young people, like from ages 18 to 33. A third of this cohort, of that age cohort, is unaffiliated. This is highest, the nuns are highest among unmarried men. Women tend not to be, or less inclined, but church attendance among women, which usually was very high, has been declining. The number of US Catholics has declined from about 25% to 20% now. The 4 words that nuns use to describe churches, I think, are very important for religious people to get: judgmental, homophobic, hypocritical, and too political. That's how churches appear to these people.
That is enlightening, and that 25% decrease to 20% was over what time?
Well, for most of the 20th century, it was at 25%, around 25%. And in the last, I guess since 2008, I think in 2008, it was still close to 25.
Right. That's a significant drop. So in our, our conversation today helps us to come to terms with really what is a growing faith reality within our church and within our parishes, and this we have to face. So Dr. Portier and Sister Angela Ann, can you offer us a few closing remarks to help us be informed conversationalists within our faith communities today? So Dr. Portier, can we start with you and end with Sister Angela Ann?
Yeah, I would say that Pope Francis is an evangelical pope. And, the title of his first encyclical was Evangelii Gaudium, which he took from Pope Paul VI, 1975 encyclical Evangelii Nuntiandi, which he calls the greatest pastoral document that has ever been written to this date in 2013. He cites it 13 times in Evangelii Gaudium. So one thing that I would recommend, I don't know how this would work in a parish, but people need to read Evangelii Nuntiandi. It's much shorter than Evangelii Gaudium. And its main message is that evangelization is witness. And it recognizes that that's where evangelization is introduced into Catholic discourse in 1975. And it basically comes from Argentina. The drafters of it were Argentinian, and it's very reflective of the theology of the people and of the dialogue that's been going on between the Latin American Bishops' Conference and Rome. Sometimes a rocky dialogue since 1968, but it's very much the fruits of that, and it's just something. Evangelii Nuntiandi is great. I used it with students before Pope Francis was elected. And after he was elected, I thought, wow, this is great. He likes this too. People learn more willingly from teachers who are witnesses. The main way to evangelizes by being a witness to Christ.
Yes. So before we go to Sister Angela Ann, you know, one of our archbishops here in this archdiocese used to say the only gospel many will read is the gospel of our own lives. So that whole power of witnessing what we preach. So Sister Angela Ann, can you offer us your closing remarks?
Well, I think that Dr. Portier summarized it very, very well. And I think what our Archbishop Jason Gordon talks about is right on target. And sometimes we make things more complicated than they need to be. But definitely, because we live in this time of constant change, and social media only puts it in our face all the time. We can't seem to get away from it. I do think we need to be informed, and we need to be willing to read and to discuss it, and to have conversations in our parishes. And on our pastoral councils and catechists need to come together, and our students need to become aware of what these ideas are. So it's a great time. We have great resources to use. So I really encourage everyone to take some time, maybe as we continue to move through our lives, that we take study a little more seriously in our life, and simply say, let's get on with it. Let's be informed. And let's practice what we believe every day.
Thank you for that. You know, Sister, the role of the catechist is really coming to the fore, and you mentioned it just now. This is a conversation that is going to come up in our parishes. It's already here. And to be informed conversationalists, we have to take on what you say. We have to read the literature that is available from our Pope and from, you know, learned ones in our midst, Dr. Portier. We have to read your books and bring those conversations into our parishes. You see the plug for your book there? So we have to bring these conversations into our parishes. Both of you have said so, because the growing trend among our younger Catholics is, and younger people throughout the world, is for that clarity, for logic, and therefore just telling them, well, that's a mystery, and leaving them there is no longer going to cut it for them. So I want to thank both of you all very much for your learned insights on what it is to be an evangelical Catholic. It is a reality in our church today, and you have explored that topic really ably for our viewers. And thank you, viewers, for tuning into Ethos, and we'll see you again.